Upon the banks of a broad river stood a little village. The people were prosperous and happy. Then a terrible misfortune fell upon the people. An ogre came to live near them. He laid out a race course and amused himself by challenging the young men of the village to race with him. None dared to refuse, for the ogre was cruel and vengeful, and they feared what he might do if the villagers refused. Still, to race him meant death. "Life against life," the ogre would cry. "My life in wager against yours." None of the men could ever win. If the ogre found he was behind, he would change himself into a wolf, a deer, or a buffalo, and easily win the race. One after another, the finest young men of the village were slain. A deep gloom settled over those left alive. They would have taken their wives and children and left, but the ogre would follow. Away from the other lodges, in the shadow of the forest, lived a widow with a daughter and a young son. The widow's husband and her 10 oldest sons had all raced with the ogre, and all had paid with their lives. One day, a shadow fell across the floor. A handsome young warrior stood in the doorway. They had never seen him before. The sunshine played on his shining limbs like fire. His eyes were bright and piercing, and above his forehead waved a plume of gorgeous feathers. He came 3 times to court the girl by bringing game. After the 3rd, he stayed in the widow's lodge, and the girl became his wife. Every morning he went away. Where, they did not know, but every night he came back with the choicest game and fish. With so much game hanging about the lodge, it was not long before the ogre grew suspicious. At last he questioned the widow. "All this game, where does it come from?" The widow began to tremble. "My son." "Your son? If he is old enough to shoot such game, he is old enough to race with me." The ogre turned on his heel and strode away. The widow and her daughter were frightened. Either they lost the warrior or the boy to the race. That night the widow told the warrior how the ogre had questioned her. "I will race with this ogre. Tomorrow ask him, the ogre, and I will talk." The next morning the ogre appeared at the lodge door, but the warrior had already gone to the forest. Looking about him, the ogre saw all the fresh meat. "Truly your son has become a mighty hunter." "No, it is not my son, but my son-in-law who has shot all this game. He is a mighty warrior. He will return soon if you wait." "I knew it! None may hope to deceive me for long." He had not been there long before the warrior appeared in the doorway. The ogre's eyes glistened at the sight of him. The warrior greeted the ogre and sat down. The ogre asked the warrior if he would race with him, and the warrior agreed. "I am not as strong and tireless as I once was. If I race with you, you must let me set the wager." The warrior agreed to this, and the next day they met. "You have let me choose my own wager. It is this: life against life, my life against yours. This post is the goal. Yonder charred stump the turning point. The loser pays the forfeit." "So be it. I will abide by the wager, as must you." At a signal, they sprang forward. The warrior soon outstripped the ogre. His feet scarce seemed to touch the ground. His feathers streamed behind him. Sooner than usual, the ogre was obliged to turn himself into a wolf and tore past the warrior. The warrior changed himself into a partridge and flew past the ogre, lighting on the course far ahead and resuming his natural form. The ogre didn't know what had happened. He heard a whir of wings above him and saw the warrior far ahead. He was surprised, but used his magic and turned himself into a deer. With long leaps and bounds he passed the running warrior. Again there was a whir of wings. The ogre saw the warrior once more, far ahead. The charred stump was past. The ogre's heart beat hard against his sides. For a third time he used his magic, turning into his final form, a buffalo, and thundered past the warrior. Again, there was a whir of wings as a partridge flew past the buffalo. "Is this the best you can do? I fear you will lose the wager." With despair, the ogre saw the warrior once more far ahead of him, and almost within reach of the goalpost. Suddenly stopping, the ogre resumed his natural form. "Hold, hold, a word with you." The warrior laughed. Springing forward, he laid his hand on the goalpost. The ogre slowly approached. He tried to smile, but his pale lips trembled. "It was all a joke. You will spare my life, as I would have spared yours." "Wretch! What was the wager? Life against life, the loser pays the forfeit." Swift as lightning, he caught up a club hanging from the goalpost, and with one blow he struck the ogre to the earth. There was a great rejoicing and a great feast. When night came, a pale light shone upon the warrior. The villagers knew it was no human warrior who stood before them, but a good spirit. He turned to his wife and took her hand. "I must return to the spirit land. Will you come with me?" "I will go with you." So it was, they disappeared from the earth. Grass grew over the course where the ogre had run his races. His lodge fell into ruins. But around the campfires, the story of the ogre is still told.